The finger came first. Before the words. Before the whole lobby turned and stared. Dr. Soren Pike's index finger shot out like a weapon, pointing straight at Nyrik Vale's chest in the middle of the nurse's station, loud enough for every single person within 30 feet to freeze. "You think this is acceptable?" Soren's voice didn't rise. "Cut. A patient's chart sitting and signed for 40 minutes because you were, what? Chatting? Daydreaming? What exactly do you do around here, Vale?" Nyrik didn't move, didn't flinch. He stood with his hands clasped in front of him, chin slightly down, and absorbed every word like he'd had practice. Because he had. The lobby tiles reflected pale winter light. 3 nurses behind the desk stared at their screens like the screens were suddenly fascinating. A transport aide near the elevator found the ceiling extremely interesting. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Soren leaned in closer. "I asked you a question." The chart was delayed because the attending needed to update the medication order first, Nyrik said. Even. Quiet. "I flagged it. Twice. It's in the system. Don't give me a system answer. It's the correct answer." That landed wrong. Soren's jaw tightened. He stepped back, straightening his white coat like Nyrik had somehow wrinkled it. "I'll be watching you, Vale. Closely." He walked away. The lobby exhaled. Nyrik picked up his tablet, pulled the ensign chart, and kept moving. "Hi, viewers. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something personal. Have you ever stayed quiet to protect someone else, even when it cost you everything? Drop your answer in the comments. Because what Nyrik Vale was protecting, nobody in that hospital had any idea. He clocked out at 7 that evening, walked through the sliding glass doors, and there it was, across the street, under the row of oak trees that lined the parking structure. A single black SUV, engine off. Windows dark. Same spot as last Friday. And the Friday before that. Nyrik stopped on the sidewalk, watched it for a moment, then kept walking. He told himself it was nothing. Told himself the city was full of black SUVs and people had reasons to park places and none of it had anything to do with him. He almost believed it. Almost. But by sunset, the SUV wasn't alone. The kid asked the question nobody else had the courage to say out loud. Room 214, 7 years old. Post-op, 2 days out from a routine appendix removal, sitting up in his hospital bed with a superhero coloring book on his lap and eyes that missed absolutely nothing. "How come that man keeps yelling at you?" Nyrik paused mid-chart, looked up. "Which man?" "The one in the big coat." The boy Darius, his bracelet red, Darius Elliott Monroe, tilted his head. "He was yelling again this morning in the hall. I heard it. Doctors get stressed." Nyrik kept his voice easy. "It doesn't mean anything." Darius stared at him with the flat, unimpressed look only small children and very old people could pull off. "My grandma says people who yell at people who can't yell back are cowards." Nyrik said nothing for a second. "Your grandma sounds smart." Darius went back to his coloring book. Satisfied, Nyrik finished the chart, adjusted the 4-line, and walked out. The hallway was quiet at this hour, early evening, the shift change still 20 minutes out. He passed the break room, stopped. On the table inside, 2 large bags from the deli 4 blocks down. A receipt taped to the outside. Paid in full, night staff, written in black marker on the bag. No name, no note, no signature. 3rd time this month. The week before, a supply cart had appeared outside the pediatric wing stocked with things the department had been waiting on for almost 2 months. Compression wraps, pediatric pulse ox sensors, backup battery units for the monitors. The purchase order showed the items had been paid for through an anonymous donor account. Legal reviewed it, found nothing wrong with the paperwork. proved the donation. The hospital called it community generosity. Nyrek stood in the break room doorway and stared at those bags for a long moment. Community generosity didn't have this kind of precision. Somebody knew the night staff's rotation schedule, knew what was running low in pediatrics, knew which nights Nyrek worked overtime. He turned and looked out the break room window at the parking structure across the street. Dark. No SUVs tonight. He went back to work. It was almost midnight when he found it, tucked under the clip of his locker. Plain white envelope. No return address. No sender. Just his name. Nyrek Vale. Written in handwriting he almost recognized. The child said something that stayed with him all night. People who yell at people who can't yell back are cowards. He turned the envelope over in his hands. Then he found an envelope with no sender, addressed only to me. There was a morning in January, 6 years ago, when a subway tunnel collapsed under the east side of the city. Nyrek had been 24, 2 years out of nursing school. He'd been riding the 6 train to a volunteer shift at a free clinic in Harlem when it happened. A structural failure, 3 cars partially derailed, smoke filling the tunnel before the lights even cut out. He didn't think. He moved. He worked in that tunnel for 4 hours with his bare hands and whatever supplies were in his bag. He triaged by feel, by sound. He talked to people in the dark. He kept 2 passengers breathing who would not have made it to the surface otherwise. One of them was a man he never saw clearly. Broad shoulders, dark hair plastered with dust, a deep gash running from his temple to his jaw. He'd been unconscious when Nyrek reached him, and when he finally opened his eyes, dark, steady, even through obvious pain, he looked at Nyrek like he was cataloging him. "Don't move," Nyrek had said. "You've got head trauma. Stay still." "I'm fine," the man had said. "You're not." The man had almost smiled. "You're bossy." "I'm a nurse." They didn't exchange names. There wasn't time. Other people needed help, and by the time paramedics flooded the tunnel and they were both pulled toward different exits, Nyrek had lost him in the chaos. He thought about that man sometimes. Not constantly, not obsessively, just sometimes. The way the man's eyes had stayed calm when everything else was falling apart. The way he'd kept breathing, slow and even, following every instruction, even when Nyrek could see the effort it cost him. Like he had decided to trust a stranger in a dark tunnel. And meant it completely. Nyrek never knew what happened to him after that night. Never saw a follow-up in the papers. Never found a name. He told himself that was fine. People survived things and moved on. That was how it was supposed to work. He kept that story locked away. Told almost no one. Not because it was painful, because it felt private in a way he couldn't explain. Some memories don't belong in the open air. Some promises, even the unspoken ones, are still promises. I didn't know his name then. I only realized who he really was years later. It started with one missing chart. Room 308. A patient named Gerald Okafor, 61 years old, post-cardiac procedure, discharged the previous Thursday. His follow-up paperwork, medication adjustments, referral notes, discharge summary, gone. Not misfiled. Not delayed. Gone from the system entirely. Nyrek noticed the gap Tuesday morning during rounds. Flagged it to the charge nurse. Started a report. By Tuesday afternoon, Dr. Soren Pike had already been informed. By Wednesday morning, Soren had called a meeting. Vale. He said the name the way you'd say a word you regretted learning. Would you like to explain to me how a patient left this hospital without a complete discharge file? I filed it, Nyrek said. I can show you the timestamp. The timestamp, Soren repeated slowly, like the word amused him. Showing a file that no longer exists? 3 department heads sat around the conference table. None of them looked at Nyrek. "Someone deleted it," Nyrek said. Silence. "That's a serious accusation," one of the department heads said. "It's a serious problem." Soren set a folder on the table, slid it across. "This isn't the first irregularity flagged to your name this quarter." Nyrek opened the folder. He didn't recognize half of what was in it. Incidents he had no memory of. Complaint forms with his name typed at the top. One of them dated to a shift he hadn't even worked. He looked up. "These aren't accurate. That's what they all say." The meeting ended without resolution. Pending investigation. Standard language. Standard tone. But on his way back to the floor, Nyrek passed 2 coworkers in the hallway who had been friendly to him for 3 years. They looked away. Both of them. At once. That was the moment it became real. He stepped into the stairwell, let the door close behind him, and stood there for exactly 30 seconds. Then he straightened up, walked back out. He had patience. He had a job to do. Room 214. Darius was awake, coloring book open again, when Nyrek came in to check his vitals. "You look tired," Darius said. "Busy day." The boy watched him with those sharp, quiet eyes. "Did the coat man do something again?" Nyrek clipped the pulse ox sensor onto Darius's finger. Said nothing for a moment. "Everything's fine, D." Darius didn't look convinced. Later that night, alone in the parking structure elevator, Nyrek pulled out his phone, typed a single message to a number he rarely used. "Something's happening at the hospital." The reply came back in under 40 seconds. "I know. Stay calm. Don't escalate." He stared at those words for a long time. "I wasn't just losing my reputation. Someone was carefully setting a trap." The first time Cale Ashford walked back into Nyrek's life, it was raining. Not a dramatic storm, just the kind of slow, gray, October rain that makes the city look tired. Nyrek had been volunteering at a community health fair in the Bronx. Blood pressure screenings, flu shots, basic wellness checks, when a man sat down at his table without being called. He was wearing a plain black jacket. No logos. Hair a little shorter than Nyrek remembered. The scar from his temple to his jaw had faded to a thin silver line. But the eyes were the same. Dark. Still. Watching. Nyrek's pen stopped moving. The man looked at him for one long second. "You don't remember me." "I remember you," Nyrek said. A pause. "The tunnel," the man said. "The tunnel," Nyrek confirmed. They sat across from each other for a moment that had no real language for itself. 6 years. A subway collapse. And now a folding table with blood pressure cuffs and paper cups of water between them. "I looked for you," the man said. "After. For a while. I didn't leave a name." "Neither did I." Nyrek picked up his pen again. "Blood pressure today?" The man, Cale, he said eventually, just Cale, sat for the screening. They talked. Slowly at first. Then less slowly. By the end of the afternoon, he'd helped Nyrek pack up the equipment without being asked. Stacked the folding chairs. Carried 2 boxes to the van. It wasn't romantic. Not yet. It was just 2 people who recognized each other across 6 years and a lot of silence, and decided, without saying it out loud, not to walk away again. What came after happened gradually, and then all at once. By the following spring, Nyrek knew things about Cale Ashford that no one in his public life would believe. The scope of what he controlled. The weight of it. The precise, careful way he moved through a world that Nyrek had no business standing in. He offered Nyrek everything. Said it plainly the way Cale said most things. Not as a gift, as a fact. You could leave all of it. The hospital. The 12-hour shifts. The people who don't see you. Nyrek had looked at him across the kitchen table. Kale's kitchen, marble counters, city view, the kind of quiet that only came with serious money, and thought about it. Really thought about it. Then he shook his head. I don't want to leave. Why not? Because those people need someone. Kale had looked at him for a long time after that. Then, quietly, so do I. The engagement happened 3 months later. Small. Private. A single evening. No announcement. No celebration that anyone outside the two of them would ever know about. Because Kale explained, carefully and completely, that making it public while he was still dismantling the alliances he'd spent years building would put people in danger. Real danger. People Nyrek cared about. Colleagues. Patients. How long? Nyrek had asked. I don't know exactly. That's not an answer. I know. Kale's hand had covered his on the table. I'm asking you to trust me anyway. And Nyrek had. Fully. Without reservation. Not because he was naive. Because he had watched this man stay calm in a collapsing tunnel. Had watched him keep breathing on command in the dark. Following a stranger's voice on pure trust. He knew what Kale's trust looked like. He offered him everything. I asked him to give me one thing instead. Secrecy. They didn't call it a firing. They called it an administrative suspension pending investigation. Said it calmly. In writing. On hospital letterhead with 3 signatures at the bottom. None of them Soren Pike's, which was the tell. Soren's fingerprints were all over it. His name was nowhere on it. That was intentional. The HR director, a woman named Patricia Elaine Bowen, read the letter aloud in a conference room on the 4th floor while Nyrek sat across from her with his hands flat on the table and said absolutely nothing. Effective immediately, she said. You'll be asked to surrender your badge and access card at the front desk. Security will escort you out. Nyrek looked at her. Security, he repeated. It's standard procedure. It wasn't. He'd been at Meridian General for 6 years. He knew every person in that building by name, by shift, by the way they took their coffee. He had never once been accused of anything. Not a single formal complaint. Not one. And now 2 security guards, young guys, both looking anywhere except at his face, were waiting outside the conference room door. He stood up, signed the acknowledgement form, folded his copy. Patricia Bowen said, I'm sorry, Mr. Vale. He didn't answer. The walk through the lobby took 43 seconds. He counted. The nurse's station went quiet as he passed. Someone behind the desk made a sound that might have been his name. Cut off before it finished. He didn't turn around. The sliding doors opened. Cold air hit him. And from somewhere behind him, from down the hall near the elevator bank, came a sound that stopped him completely on the sidewalk. A child crying. Room 214 was on the 2nd floor. Overlooked the front entrance. He didn't look up. He kept walking. The news hit the local health sector feeds by late afternoon. Nurse suspended amid records falsification probe at Meridian General. His name. His photo from the hospital directory, the one they'd taken 3 years ago during a staff update, him in scrubs, smiling at nothing in particular. His phone started vibrating. He turned it face down on the kitchen table and sat there in the quiet of his apartment and stared at the wall. He believed, in that moment, that it was over. All of it. 6 years of work. Patience he'd fought for. Nights he'd stayed past shift end because someone needed someone to stay. Gone. He never looked back. Until he heard tires pulling into the parking lot. 11. 1 at a time. Then 2 more. Then 3. The parking lot of Meridian General filled from the east entrance. Black SUVs rolling in slow and deliberate. Not fast, not aggressive, just steady. The way a tide comes in. Quiet until it isn't. Inside, A nurse named Deja Fontaine was the first one to notice. She was standing at the window of the second-floor break room with a cup of coffee going cold in her hand, watching the lot, and she said, to no one in particular, "What in the world?" The front desk called security. Security called the hospital administrator, a man named Reginald Thorne, who was on his third call of the day with legal and did not appreciate the interruption until he heard the number. 11. He hung up, went to the window. They were already parking. Precise, evenly spaced, taking up the entire east lot without touching a single existing vehicle, like whoever planned this had measured the space in advance, which they had. Staff drifted toward windows. Phones came out. Someone in radiology texted someone in cardiology. Word moved through the building faster than the elevator. By the time the first SUV door opened, the hospital lobby had quietly filled with people who all suddenly needed to be somewhere near the front entrance. The man who stepped out wasn't what any of them expected. No uniform, no visible security detail in front of him. Just a dark coat, no tie, and the kind of stillness that made you aware of how much space a person could own just by standing in it. He walked through the front doors. The lobby went silent in a way lobbies rarely do. Not the hush of routine, the hush of a room recalibrating. Reginald Thorne was already at the bottom of the stairs, hand outstretched, voice doing the thing administrators do when they're managing something they don't yet understand. "Sir, I don't believe we have an appointment." The man didn't slow down, didn't look at Thorne, didn't look at the nurses or the security desk, or the phones pointed in his direction. He looked at the door, and then past it, at Nyrick Vale, who had come back. Not for any reason he could fully explain, just a pull, the kind you can't argue with. He'd turned his car around 3 blocks from the hospital and driven back without knowing why. And he was standing just outside the sliding doors when they opened, and he saw Cale walking toward him through a lobby full of frozen strangers. Cale stopped 2 feet in front of him. The whole room was watching. He didn't care. Nyrick, not Mr. Vale. Not a title. Not a formality. His name. The way only one person had ever said it. Like it meant something specific. Like it was a word Cale had decided mattered before anyone else got a vote. No one recognized him. Then he called me by the name only one person ever used. "This is my fiancé." Cale said it to the room. Not loudly. Not performing it. Just stated it the way you'd state a fact that had always been true and simply hadn't been announced yet. The lobby didn't react immediately. There was a half-second of processing, of people looking at Nyrick, then at Cale, then at Nyrick again, and then the whole room seemed to shift on its axis. Reginald Thorne's hand was still extended in midair. He lowered it slowly. Deja Fontaine, who had come downstairs for reasons she would later struggle to explain, pressed her hand flat against her collarbone. Dr. Soren Pike appeared at the edge of the lobby. He'd been called down with the others, part of the general alarm that pulled staff toward the entrance. He stood near the reception desk, and when Cale's eyes found him, he went very still. Cale looked at him for exactly 3 seconds. Then he looked away. That was worse. "My name is Cale Ashford." His voice carried without effort. "I've been aware of the situation at this hospital for several weeks. I chose to allow the internal investigation to proceed on its own. It did not proceed honestly." A woman in a navy blazer, one of the 3 who had signed Nyrick's suspension letter, stepped forward. "Mr. Ashford, this is a personnel matter and—" "The records were altered," Cale said. "I have the original system logs, the deletion timestamps, the user IDs attached to those deletions." He paused. "I also have the source of the forged incident reports." Silence. 2 independent investigators are already in your records department, Cale continued. They arrived at 8 this morning. Your legal team was notified 20 minutes ago. The woman in the navy blazer looked at her phone, looked back up, said nothing. Nyrek stood beside Cale and felt something in his chest loosen. The thing he'd been holding tight for weeks, maybe months. Not gone, just released. He hadn't asked for this moment, hadn't wanted a scene, hadn't wanted any of it to go this way. But Cale had given him the only thing that mattered. The truth in a room full of people who had chosen to ignore it. Why did you keep it secret? Someone asked from the back of the lobby. A junior nurse, younger, voice thin with shock. The engagement. Why didn't anyone know? Cale looked at Nyrek. Nyrek answered, because people I cared about would have been in danger, he said. We made a decision. We kept it. The room took that in. Everyone thought the mystery was over. It had only just begun. The investigation didn't take long. That was the part nobody expected. People assumed it would drag. Attorneys, appeals, motions. The kind of legal machinery that grinds for months and produces paperwork and almost never produces answers. Took 11 days. The lead investigator, a woman named Claudette Rains-Dubois, brought in from an independent firm with a reputation nobody in hospital administration wanted to test, presented her findings to the board on a Thursday morning with no media present and no advance warning. 3 names. The records deletion had been carried out by a senior IT coordinator named Marcus Delp, who had been approached 6 weeks earlier with a number that made the risk feel manageable. It wasn't. The forged incident reports had been prepared by a clerical supervisor who reported indirectly to someone on the credentialing committee, someone who had a history with a former patient of Nyrek's, someone whose complaint had been denied 2 years prior because Nyrek's documentation was clean and complete and irrefutable. That complaint had never gone away. It had just waited. Soren Pike was implicated in 3 of the 7 falsified entries. Not as the origin, as the delivery mechanism. He had passed documents he claimed he hadn't reviewed. The board didn't find that believable. Neither did anyone else. The hallway outside the boardroom was empty when Claudette Rains-Dubois walked out. She stopped beside Nyrek, who had been asked to wait, and had waited, in a chair near the water fountain for 4 hours without complaint. She handed him a 1-page summary. You're cleared, she said. Fully. In writing. Effective today. He read it once. Folded it. Put it in his pocket. Thank you, he said. She studied him for a moment. You're calmer than most people are when I tell them this. I knew it was coming. How? He thought about a man who stayed calm in a collapsing tunnel. About dark eyes in the dark. About trust given without a reason and honored anyway. I had good information, he said. Cale, when told, did not celebrate. Did not threaten. Did not use any of the leverage he clearly had to make anyone's life more difficult than the investigation already had. He funded a patient care improvement initiative instead. 12 months of operational grants directed specifically to Meridian General's pediatric and overnight departments, the 2 most underfunded floors in the building. No announcement, no press release. The grants arrived through a foundation. Quietly, the board voted to restructure the credentialing committee. Added external oversight. Rewrote 3 internal complaint handling policies. Reginald Thorne sent Nyrek a personal letter. It was 3 paragraphs long. Nyrek read it, set it on the counter, made coffee. He expected anger. What happened next surprised even him. 8 months later, Darius Elliott Monroe walked through the front doors of Meridian General in sneakers that lit up when he stepped and a jacket his grandmother had clearly ironed that morning with great personal investment. He was not there as a patient. He was there because his grandmother had called ahead and asked if Nyrek would be working that afternoon, and Nyrek had said yes, and Darius had apparently announced at breakfast that he had somewhere to be. He found Nyrek at the nurse's station on the second floor, mid-chart, same as always. "You look less tired," Darius said. Nyrek looked up, smiled, a real one, not the careful kind he used to wear for 12 hours straight. "Better days," he said. Darius climbed onto the waiting chair beside the desk, uninvited, entirely at home, and surveyed the floor like a man reviewing his territory. "Is your person coming today?" "Later." "The one with the cars?" "That's him." Darius nodded, apparently satisfied with this. "My grandma says he's famous." "He's private," Nyrek said. "Same thing," Darius said confidently. It wasn't. But Nyrek didn't argue. The floor moved around them, nurses passing, monitors beeping. The ordinary, relentless rhythm of a hospital doing what hospitals do, holding people at the edge of something and pulling them back over and over every day. Nyrek had spent 6 years inside that rhythm, had learned to breathe with it, had been broken by it once temporarily and had come back. Not because of Kale, not only because of him, because the patients were still there. The overnight staff still needed someone to show up. Darius had once asked why people yell at people who can't yell back, and the answer hadn't changed. Because some people don't know any other way to feel powerful. And some people do. Kale arrived at 4:17. No convoy this time. One vehicle. He walked through the lobby without announcement, nodded to Deja at the front desk, who nodded back like this was now a normal Tuesday, which it increasingly was, and took the stairs to the second floor. Darius saw him first. "There he is," he said, with the unmistakable tone of a 7-year-old who had decided someone was worth his approval. Kale looked down at him. "You must be Darius." Darius looked up. "You're taller than I thought." "You're exactly what I expected," Kale said. Darius processed this, decided it was a compliment, slid off the chair. "I'm gonna go find my grandma." He walked away, sneakers lighting up with every step. Kale stood beside Nyrek. Didn't touch him. Didn't need to. Just stood there in the quiet of a hospital floor on a regular afternoon. The two of them watching a 7-year-old navigate a hallway like he owned it. "The venue confirmed," Kale said. "Which one?" "The one you actually wanted. Not the one you said was fine." Nyrek looked at him sideways. Kale was already looking at him. "You always know," Nyrek said. "Usually." They stood there a moment longer. The monitors kept their rhythm. Somewhere down the hall, a patient laughed at something. Sudden and real, the kind of laugh that caught you off guard in a hospital because you didn't always expect to hear it. Nyrek thought about a tunnel, about the dark, and a stranger's voice, and a decision made without a single guarantee attached to it. He thought about what it meant to trust someone completely, not because the math worked out, because the person was worth it. Real power, he had come to understand, didn't live in 11 SUVs or a room full of people going silent. It lived in choosing, every single day, to protect what mattered, to stay compassionate when the pressure said otherwise, to choose love when fear was easier, to be the person who showed up. Every time. And every time he heard engines outside the hospital now, he didn't think about fear anymore. He remembered the day his hidden life finally became his future. If this story moved you, if you've ever stayed quiet to protect someone, or waited for the truth to finally come out, drop a comment below and let us know. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. And if you want more stories that hit different, stories about courage, loyalty, and love that doesn't fold under pressure, subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Every story we bring to this channel is built for people who believe that real strength looks like compassion. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. We'll see you in the next one.